Now, we jump down to verse 26 and 27, where God introduces this incredible concept that is rooted in agency, which is so interesting, because this is that concept, that gift of God given to us in the premortal realm that we're taught in the book of Moses, that Satan sought to destroy the agency of man. That's the way it words that. Satan is doing everything he can to attack this. Notice what God does to empower this, to unfold more opportunities for us to use agency. Look at verse 26. For behold, it is not meet that I should command in all things. For he that is compelled in all things, the same is a slothful and not a wise servant, wherefore he receiveth no reward. It's this idea of a person saying, Lord, here I am. I'm your instrument. I'm your servant. I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. I'm waiting. I'm waiting. And we don't move. Why do you think, Alex, that he used the word slothful? Why that word?
Well, you look up the definition, it means slow. And boy, I just have to think about an actual sloth. There's various, how do I say it, breeds. There's a 2-clawed sloth and the 3-clawed sloth, but 3-toed. But they move slowly. 90% of the time, they're motionless. 90%. I just kind of wonder what their function is in terms of the creation.
In the bigger creation story.
They can't crawl on the ground very well. It takes them a minute to go 9 feet. And I've just joked with my students at times that I think the Lord created the sloth just so he could use it in section 58. It's such an example of a creature that is just doesn't do a lot in terms of his motion and his activity. And so I think, and again, he mentioned slothful, a couple of times, the variation of the word there. So I think it's highly descriptive of saying, take action, move, let's make things happen. And use your agency. I don't have to tell you everything. Take some initiative on your own.
It's interesting if you look at it from this perspective of a member of the church who maybe sits and waits for God to give them revelation or inspiration to go and visit that person, or to make a ministering visit to this family, or to make a meal for that family, versus the saint who, verse 27, verily I say, men should be anxiously engaged in a good cause and do many things of their own free will and bring to pass much righteousness. There will be times, now we need to be careful here that we don't demonize either side. There will be times when you'll be going through life and the Lord will inspire you. He will give you directions. Go, that person needs your help, or this situation needs your attention. And that's wonderful, and we act on that. I think the essence of verse 26 and 27 is, don't have those be the only times when you're going out and doing good things for people. In other words, there may be times when you decide to go and make a ministering visit without having felt inspired or prompted at all. You just think, I'm going to go visit so-and-so. And you might end up standing on somebody's front porch, knocking on a door, saying to yourself, I don't have a clue what I'm going to say here, but you know what? It's a good thing to do. Or you might take some nice gift or a meal or some treat to somebody, not because you had this revelation that they're struggling and they need it, but because that's a nice thing to do. Or you might sit down and talk to somebody, not because you were inspired that they're in the depths of despair, but because it's a nice thing to do, to build them up. Some of my most memorably powerful experiences with people in ministering have come when I was just trying to be a good person, not because I had had some big grand revelation telling me I needed to go and do it, but because I just go out and I try to be good and I try to do good things.
Reminds me of the wonderful LDS hymn, have I done any good in the world today? Have I helped anyone in need?
Just for fun, some of you have probably heard that old story that goes way back of the guy who every morning on his exercise routine would walk clear down to the train station to be able to sit there and watch the train come in and then depart at 5:30 a.m. every day from the train station. And the station master finally one day said, why do you come clear down here this early in the morning every day? And he said, it's because I want to see something move without me having to push it before I begin my day at work. It's just nice to see something happen without me having to make it happen. Silly story with, I think, a pretty profound lesson that the Lord doesn't want us to have to be compelled. He doesn't want to have to push us in everything. As we become more like Him, we just start inherently and naturally doing more of what He would do, which is turning outward, serving people, whether we get that push or not. We just do it.
And that's where true happiness comes.
Yeah. Look at the description here in verse 28. For power is in them, wherein they are agents unto themselves, and inasmuch as men do good, they shall in no wise lose their reward. I think if we were to talk to Martin Harris today, I don't think he would say, oh man, I wish I would have held on to more of my money. Think of all of the worldly possessions I could have purchased for me. I don't think he'd say that. Versus the opposite, look at verse 29, but he that doeth not anything until he is commanded and receiveth the commandment with a doubtful heart and keepeth it with slothfulness, the same is damned. Who am I that made man, saith the Lord, that will hold him guiltless that obeys not my commandments? Brothers and sisters, he's showing us here the difference between, it's kind of a good, better, best. It's good to keep a commandment. It's better to keep it, kind of willingly, and it's best to keep it with this full perspective of I love the Lord, and I'll give everything and anything that is required. Look at verse 32. I command, and men obey not. I revoke, and they receive not the blessing. What the Lord seems to be saying here is, if you choose not to obey, then I will occasionally have to revoke that blessing that was promised. What will sometimes happen is people will point a finger of accusation or scorn at Joseph Smith or at subsequent prophets in the Restoration and say, he can't be a prophet because he said this would happen and it didn't happen. If you look really closely at verse 32, he says, I command and men obey not. I revoke and they receive not the blessing. Some of those things that are promised, not all of them, because there are some that are independent of anything we do or don't do, they're going to happen. But some of the prophecies, some of the commands are conditional. It requires our agency and the type of agency, because you can slothfully keep a commandment and not receive the same blessings or benefits as promised as those who keep it with full purpose of heart, with an eye single to God's glory. So sometimes it would be like somebody going to a garden store and buying the best possible seeds for a particular variety of plant that they want to grow, of a particular vegetable. You could buy the very best seeds. You could go out into the very best plot of land and plant those seeds and then walk away in March. Brothers and sisters, you can't expect to come back in August and pick the very best fruits or vegetables off of that plant if you haven't nourished and nurtured and taken care of and weeded and provided the best environment for that plant to grow. Same thing with many of God's promises and commandments and prophecies is we have to use our agency to carry forth that work in our own little realm in order to produce fruit. We can't just say, oh, God's prophet made a promise, so we'll just plant that seed in our heart and say, done. And then months later, when the fruit isn't produced, we can't blame God's prophet and we can't blame God. But I can look in the mirror and say, what lack I yet? Where did I fall short? Because God's prophets, their words will be upheld. But if they're conditional, that's on me. I got to do my part.
And then when they don't get the blessing, what do? And then they say in their hearts, this is not the work of the Lord. I didn't get the blessing. Well, you didn't follow through. You didn't keep the commandment to begin with. So
what would you say to somebody who's watching who maybe feels a little bit discouraged right now, listening to this segment, thinking, yeah, I received a patriarchal blessing, and in that blessing I got all of these promises given to me, but I haven't realized some of them, and I don't feel like I've been a wicked person, or I haven't done terrible things. What would you say?
Well, as long as they keep on the covenant path, those blessings will be fulfilled, maybe in ways they don't recognize at the time or even understand. So interesting you'd say that. I just got an email a few days ago from a young man whose grandfather was my patriarchal who gave me my patriarchal blessing. And he mentioned how his mother was the first one to get a patriarchal blessing from his grandfather. And it was about a half a page. And she was rather disappointed and said, here's my own father giving me my patriarchal blessing as a young woman. And then he said in there that years later, as now she's an older woman, every promise in there was fulfilled, even though it was short. And I had full confidence in the fact that it was totally inspired and that the Lord came through. May have not been the longest patriarchal blessing, but every promise was given.
Beautiful. It's beautiful. So we move forward. We move forward in faith. We don't define ourselves by past struggles, but by future blessings and benefits.